So chapter 5, verse 4 and 5 give us some timestamp elements in this story of King David. It says, David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years. I don't know, but I think it's significant that Jesus begins his ministry at age 30. David begins his reign at age 30. This sign in the New Testament, especially with Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, one of Matthew's main stated purposes is to show us how Jesus Christ is the son of David, the legitimate heir to David's throne. And so you're going to see a lot of things match up and line up between David's life and Jesus' life, all of the good elements.
Including, it says in verse 5, he reigned 33 years over all Israel and Judah. And according to some chronologies, Jesus was 33 years on the earth. So there's fun little details here in the scriptures.
So now he's going to go into what we call Jerusalem today. So David goes and he's the one who's going to attack the Jebusites in this walled city. And it's a fortified city. And the Jebusites think there's no way anybody can get us. But David and his men find a way through the culverts and the drainage system to get in and overthrow them. And at the time of Jesus, Jerusalem looks roughly like that. And here's the Temple Mount. And you have the Kidron Valley here. You have the Hinnom Valley here. Mount of Olives here. Garden of Gethsemane right about here. That's Jerusalem. And when we think Jerusalem today, it's massive. It's spread over all this area. But at the time of David, Jerusalem is that. It's this little finger between the Tyropoeon Valley and the Kidron Valley. And it's later on that they're going to expand up on top of Mount Moriah. And here's where Solomon, his son, is going to build the temple. But that is Jerusalem. And so they call it, when he overthrows the Jebusites, they call it the city of David. So moving forward, Jerusalem is going to become this capital city for the kingdom of Israel.
A really important place because this is on a ridge, very difficult to take. You have these massive walls, and there's an ever-flowing spring of water called the Gihon Spring. And anywhere you go in the world, you need water to survive. And where this city was first established, whoever established it first, was smart because they established it right next to this ever-flowing stream of water. An enormous amount of water comes out of that, and this plays an important role, this source of water, throughout the Israelite history. In some ways, it's still symbolically important today in Jerusalem.
Beautiful. So at the time of Isaiah, when Hezekiah is the king, he's actually going to build Hezekiah's tunnel, which is going to connect it down to the Pool of Siloam. But we'll talk about that later, many weeks down the road. So he's now setting up his kingdom, and you'll notice a pattern here in this early part of King David's reign. Look at verse 19. And David inquired of the Lord, saying, Shall I go up unto the Philistines? Wilt thou deliver them into mine hand? And the Lord said unto David, Go up, for I will doubtless deliver the Philistines into thy hand. Look at verse 23. After he goes and he wins that battle, then chapter 5, verse 23. When David inquired of the Lord, he said, Thou shalt not go up, but fetch a compass behind them and come up upon them over against the mulberry trees. So the next time there's another army threatening, and he's not trusting in the arm of flesh. He's not saying, well, I took out Goliath, so I've got this. He keeps going to the Lord. He's inquiring of the Lord, and he's not just asking, he's listening. He's hearing the Lord, and he's heeding what the Lord tells him to do. And shocker, he's prospering. God is saying, if you'll be my people, I will be your God. I'll protect you. And that's exactly what we get in this early phase of David's reign as king. He recognizes who the real king is, and he's turning to him repeatedly.
We see this going on in the Book of Mormon. Alma the Younger, who often inquires of the Lord when there's warfare going on. So we see this pattern that a ruler's job is not simply to sit on a throne and collect the resources like we saw King Noah do, but to lead out by seeking the will of God and enacting the will of God and modeling for everybody, this is what it means to follow God's revelations. Really fascinating. We have modern day prophets who inquire of the Lord. They are there to protect us and they lead out. And if we follow them, we are likely to be happy and prosper. Just like those who followed Alma the Younger or David. So we see this pattern. Leaders who inquire of the Lord and follow him prosper. And people who follow inspired leaders prosper.
Okay, so in chapter 6, David is now going to move his capital city into this, what he's calling the city of David. And to this day, if you go to Jerusalem, this part of Jerusalem is called the city of David. All these years later, the name still sticks. And so as he's moving all of his furniture and his possessions and everything into this new capital city, the most important thing to move in is the Ark of the Covenant. So they build a new cart, they put the Ark of the Covenant on the cart, and they start bringing it with timbrels, cymbals, cornets, psalteries, this huge parade, this celebration. And look at verse 6. When they came to Nachon's threshing floor, Uzzah put forth his hand to the ark of God and took hold of it, for the oxen shook it. So Uzzah's this guy who's not apparently a Levite, and he puts his hand, and you've heard the phrase, don't steady the ark. Well, that's what Uzzah's doing. And the outcome is not good for him. The anger of the Lord was kindled against Uzzah, and God smote him there for his error, and there he died by the ark of God. And as Taylor mentioned at the beginning of this episode, this is a foreign land to us and a foreign time, and it feels really harsh. It would be nice to get some actual video footage from that day to know exactly what happened, but since we don't have that, let's not spend as much time focusing on the difficulty of the actual event and instead use it for us and apply it or liken it to our day in what are ways that we, as well-intentioned as can be, sometimes try to tell the Lord what to do or tell leaders how to govern the church. And so there's a nice pattern here that even though you may think there's a better way to do something, then in that case, you can pray to the Lord and ask for that revelation to be given rather than trying to steady the ark ourselves.
Like taking power and authority to yourself and say, I'm going to make this happen and I'm going to push the leader out of the way, or I'm going to take over that calling and just do it better than anybody. And it's just interesting that God works with imperfect people. I've been put in callings that other people probably would have been way more prepared to do. And like, we can just trust God that he has a plan, and we all choose to do our best within our sphere of influence. Things will work out. We don't have to leave our sphere of influence and push somebody out of their sphere of influence and say, I'm taking over what you're doing because you're not doing it right. There's a larger plan at place here.
Which, by the way, is an interesting idea from the beginning part of this story of the cart got a little bumpy. The road was not smooth. Something happened to jar the Ark of the Covenant on the cart. And sometimes you and I expect in the church and kingdom of God for things to just flow very smoothly and steadily with no bumps or bruises along the way. When in reality, I don't know of any history of any segment of the history of the world outside of a few rare exceptions with Enoch and maybe in 4th Nephi and a few other times where that is the path. It's bumpy. It's got twists and turns, and it's okay if things don't flow perfectly as long as we follow the Lord and trust his prophets as we move forward.